My daughter-in-law asked me to take her phone to get fixed. Hours later, the technician texted me, "Run now." I never imagined I'd be writing this, but I need to get it all out. My name is Diane. I'm 63 years old, and about 4 months ago, I discovered that my own son and daughter-in-law were planning to kill me. Yes, you read that right. My son, the boy I carried for 9 months, raised, put through college, and loved unconditionally for 35 years, wanted me dead. For money. It started on a Thursday morning in June. My daughter-in-law had asked me to take her phone to get fixed, an old phone she used as a backup. She said the battery was draining too fast and wanted to get it working again. I know how this sounds already, right? Why would she give me her phone? Looking back, I think she genuinely believed there was no way I'd ever see what was hidden in there. She'd been using her main phone all along, but this backup device had messages she thought were safely tucked away. I was just the harmless retired teacher mom who barely knew how to use social media. The repair shop was this tiny place near my house, run by the son of a woman I used to teach with. Nice kid, always reliable. I dropped off the phone around 10 in the morning, and he said it'd be ready by 3. I went about my day, ran some errands, had lunch with my husband. Normal stuff, boring stuff. The kind of day where you don't know your entire world is about to shatter into a million pieces. When I picked up the phone that afternoon, everything seemed fine at first. The repair guy, his name is Tony, handed it to me with this weird expression on his face. Kind of pale, kind of nervous. He asked if I could wait a minute while he did a final test to make sure everything was working properly. I said sure, no problem. That's when the notification popped up. It was just a preview on the lock screen, but I saw enough. A message from my son to his wife in some app I didn't recognize. The preview said something about the timeline for the inheritance and making sure the medical documentation is solid. My stomach dropped immediately. Tony saw it too. He looked at me, then at the phone, then back at me. "Mrs. Diane," he said quietly, "I think you need to see something. I'm really sorry, but during the repair, I accidentally opened a hidden folder. I wasn't snooping, I swear, but what I saw..." He trailed off, looking genuinely distressed. My hands were shaking as he showed me how to access the hidden chat app. What I found there made me physically ill. Months of messages between my son and his wife, planning, scheming, discussing how to make my death look natural, talking about the $3 million life insurance policy I didn't know I had, mentioning something about getting a doctor to document cognitive decline that didn't exist, referencing the power of attorney they'd convinced my husband and me to sign last year, just in case. I stood there in that tiny repair shop, reading message after message, and I felt like I was drowning. This wasn't some stranger, some random criminal. This was my child, my baby. And he was casually discussing the best way to murder me like he was planning a vacation. Tony offered to call the police right then, but I stopped him. I needed to think. I needed proof that would hold up. So I took photos of everything on my own phone, dozens of screenshots of their conversations. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the camera steady. Some of the photos came out blurry, but I got enough. I got more than enough. When I finally left the shop, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, just staring at nothing. Part of me wanted to believe it was fake, some kind of sick joke, but I knew my son's writing style, his words, his way of expressing himself. It was real. All of it was real. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through every interaction I'd had with them over the past year. Every dinner, every phone call, every concerned question about my health. It all took on a sinister new meaning. When they asked about my memory, they weren't being caring. They were building a narrative. When they insisted on that power of attorney, they weren't being helpful. They were setting up control. My husband was in the garage when I got home. I walked in through the kitchen door, set my daughter-in-law's phone on the counter exactly where it would normally go, and then I went upstairs to our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed and I cried. Not the gentle, sad kind of crying. The kind where you can't breathe, where your whole body shakes, where you make sounds you didn't know you could make. That's where my husband found me 15 minutes later. He knew immediately that something was catastrophically wrong. I couldn't even speak at first. I just handed him my phone with the photos pulled up. I watched his face as he scrolled through them, watched the confusion turn to shock, then to horror, then to something I can only describe as devastation. When he finished, he sat down next to me, and we just held each other. Our son, our only child, wanted us dead. The worst part? We just had them over for dinner 3 days before. They'd brought wine and flowers, laughed at our jokes, hugged us goodbye. The whole time they were counting down the days until they could collect their inheritance. That night, My husband and I didn't sleep at all. We sat at the kitchen table until dawn, looking through the photos again and again, trying to figure out our next move. Because here's the thing. Knowing your family wants to kill you is one thing. Proving it legally, protecting yourself, and somehow surviving the emotional devastation is something else entirely. By sunrise, we'd made a decision. We were going to fight back, we were going to survive, and we were going to make absolutely certain that our son and his wife faced every consequence of what they'd tried to do. But first, we had to be very, very careful. Because somewhere out there, my son and daughter-in-law were still free, still planning, and still had no idea that I knew everything. The morning after I discovered everything, my husband and I started digging. And let me tell you, once you know what to look for, the evidence is everywhere. It's like one of those optical illusions where once you see the hidden image, you can't unsee it. We started with our bank accounts. My husband pulled up all our statements online, and we went through them line by line. That's when we found the first red flag. Small transfers we didn't recognize. Nothing huge. $50 here, $100 there. Amounts small enough that we'd never questioned them when we glanced at the statements before. But they'd been happening for 7 months. When we added it all up, nearly $4,000 had been siphoned off. How is this even possible? My husband asked, his voice tight with anger. Then we remembered. The power of attorney. We'd signed it 14 months ago when my son convinced us it would make things easier if we ever got sick or needed help managing things. He'd made it sound so reasonable, so responsible. Just in case, he'd said. You never know what could happen. What a fool I'd been. What fools we'd both been. The next bombshell came when we looked at our insurance policies. I logged into the insurance company's website. Thank God I'd kept my own passwords for that, and nearly fell out of my chair. There was a life insurance policy I'd never authorized. $3 million with my son listed as the primary beneficiary. The policy had been opened 8 months ago, and the signature on the electronic documents looked like mine, but I'd never signed anything. My husband pulled up his own insurance information. Same thing. Another $3 million policy, also with our son as beneficiary. They were paying the premiums using money they were stealing from us. The audacity of it was almost impressive in a horrifying way. We need to see the doctor, I said suddenly. My husband looked at me confused, so I pulled up one of the messages I'd photographed. My son had written to his wife. Dr. Reynolds is on board with documenting the cognitive decline. He said it won't be a problem to note memory issues and confusion in her file. That'll give us the medical backup we need. Dr. Reynolds had been our family physician for 18 years. I'd trusted him completely. The idea that he might be involved made me feel sick all over again. I called his office first thing Monday morning and made an appointment. I said it was urgent. The receptionist, probably hearing something in my voice, got us in that same afternoon. In the meantime, we started the process of protecting ourselves. We changed every password we had. Bank accounts, insurance, email, everything. We went to the bank in person and explained that we needed to revoke the power of attorney we'd granted our son. The bank manager, this older gentleman who'd known us for years, looked concerned but processed everything immediately. He also flagged our accounts to require in-person verification for any major transactions. Has something happened? He asked gently. You could say that, my husband replied, with a bitter laugh that had no humor in it whatsoever. The hardest part was acting normal. My daughter-in-law texted me that morning asking if her phone was fixed. I responded cheerfully. All set. Tony did a great job. You can pick it up anytime. She replied with a smiley face emoji, a smiley face, while actively planning my murder. My son called that afternoon. Hey mom, just checking in. How are you feeling? Every word felt like poison now. How are you feeling? Translation? Are you getting sick yet? Are you showing any symptoms that we can exploit? Feeling great, I said, keeping my voice light. Never better, actually. There was a pause on his end. That's good. That's really good. He sounded almost disappointed. When we went to Dr. Reynolds' office that afternoon, I was ready for a confrontation. We checked in and waited, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone in the waiting room could hear it. When the nurse finally called us back, I noticed she avoided making eye contact. That was interesting. Dr. Reynolds came in with his usual friendly smile, but I saw it falter when he looked at my face. I wasn't smiling back. I need to see my complete medical file, I said without preamble. All of it. Every note you've made in the past year. His smile disappeared entirely. Mrs. Diane, I'm not sure what this is about. Yes, you are, I interrupted. My voice was steady, which surprised me. You know exactly what this is about. My son has been communicating with you about my supposed cognitive decline, the cognitive decline that doesn't exist. I want to see what you've documented. The color drained from his face. For a long moment, he just stood there, and I could see him calculating his options. Then his shoulders sagged. I need to get something from my office, he said quietly. He returned 5 minutes later with a stack of papers, my medical file. As I read through it, my hands started shaking again. There were notes about memory problems I'd never reported, mentions of confusion during appointments that had never happened, observations about mood changes and difficulty concentrating, all complete fabrications. He told me you were struggling but too proud to admit it, Dr. Reynolds said, his voice barely above a whisper. He said he was worried about you and just wanted your decline documented so you could get proper care when the time came. He made it sound like he was being a good son. And you never thought to actually ask me about any of this, my husband said, his voice cold with fury. Dr. Reynolds looked at the floor. I know I should have, but he was so convincing and I've known your family for so long. I didn't think he'd lie. We need copies of everything, I said. The real records and these fake notes. All of it. Because my son wasn't trying to get me proper care. He was building a case to have me declared incompetent so he could control my assets before killing me for the insurance money. I watched that sentence land. Dr. Reynolds went pale as paper. Oh my God, he whispered. Oh my God, what have I done? What he'd done was become an accessory to attempted murder. We left his office with printed copies of everything, including a written statement from him admitting what my son had asked him to do. Dr. Reynolds was crying when we left. I didn't feel sorry for him. That evening, my daughter-in-law came by to pick up her phone. I handed it to her with a smile, watching her face carefully for any sign that she knew I'd seen the messages. Nothing. She was either an incredible actress or genuinely confident that their secret was safe. Thanks so much for taking care of this, she said sweetly. You're the best. Anything for family, I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. After she left, my husband and I sat down with all the evidence we'd gathered. Bank statements showing the theft, insurance policies we'd never authorized, medical records that had been falsified, screenshots of their messages planning our deaths. It was overwhelming. It was damning. And we had no idea if it would be enough. We needed a lawyer, not our usual family attorney, someone completely disconnected from our previous life, someone my son wouldn't know or think to monitor. I found one through a friend of a friend, a woman who specialized in elder abuse and financial crimes. Her name was Patricia, and when we met her 2 days after the Dr. Reynolds confrontation, she didn't look remotely surprised by our story. You'd be amazed how often this happens, she said grimly, flipping through the evidence we'd brought. Or maybe you wouldn't be, given what you're living through. Adult children killing parents for inheritance is more common than people think. It's just that most people don't find out until it's too late. That sentence hit me like a punch to the gut. Most people don't find out until it's too late. I was one of the lucky ones. How absolutely insane is that? Patricia spent 3 hours going through everything with us. She made notes, asked detailed questions, and built what she called a preliminary case file. The bank statements, the fraudulent insurance policies, the fake medical records, and most importantly, the screenshots of their messages. It all went into organized folders. The messages are going to be tricky, she explained, since you accessed them without permission. There could be legal challenges to using them as evidence. But combined with everything else, especially the falsified medical records and unauthorized financial transactions, we have a strong case for fraud at minimum. The attempted murder charge will be harder to prove without more concrete evidence of actual poisoning or physical attempts. What do you mean? More concrete? My husband asked. Patricia leaned forward. We need to catch them in the act. Right now, we have planning and financial crimes. We need to prove they moved beyond planning into actual execution. The problem was, I knew they had already moved beyond planning. That thought had been gnawing at me for days. I pulled out my phone and showed Patricia another message I'd been obsessing over. My daughter-in-law had written to my son 3 weeks ago. Ready to start the tea regimen whenever you give the word. She drinks tea every afternoon like clockwork. Should start seeing effects within a month of beginning. Tea regimen. Ready to start. My blood ran cold every time I read those words. They were about to begin poisoning me. Maybe they already had through some other method we didn't know about yet. Have you been sick recently? Patricia asked, her eyes sharp. Any unexplained symptoms? Fatigue, confusion, stomach issues? I thought about it. Actually, yes. For the past few weeks, I'd been feeling oddly tired in the afternoons, a bit foggy, like I couldn't quite focus. I'd chalked it up to age, to the heat, to not sleeping well. Those could just be stress symptoms, Patricia said carefully. But we need to rule out poisoning. If they're planning to use tea as the delivery method and haven't started yet, your system should be clean. But if they've been using some other method we don't know about, we need to find out. We need to get you to a toxicologist, Patricia said immediately. If they've been poisoning you, even in small doses, it might still be detectable in your system. That would be the concrete evidence we need. The word poisoning made it all so horrifyingly real. This wasn't just theoretical anymore. They might have already been actively killing me, just slowly enough that it would look natural. We left Patricia's office with a plan. First, get toxicology tests done. Second, document everything going forward. Third, prepare for legal action while keeping up the appearance of normalcy. And fourth, be extremely careful about what we ate or drank. That last part turned out to be more important than we realized. 2 days after meeting with Patricia, my daughter-in-law showed up at our house unannounced. This wasn't unusual. She'd done it plenty of times before. But now, knowing what I knew, everything felt sinister. "I brought you some tea," she said brightly, holding up a fancy tin. "It's this amazing herbal blend from that shop downtown. I know how much you love your afternoon tea, and I thought you'd enjoy trying something new." My heart started racing. This was it. This was the tea she'd mentioned in the messages. My husband, who was in the kitchen with us, caught my eye. I could see the same realization hitting him. "Oh, how thoughtful," I said, accepting the tin with what I hoped was a grateful smile. "You're so sweet to think of me. I already made myself a cup from this batch," she said. "It's really soothing, perfect for relaxation." She was watching me carefully, I realized, watching to see if I'd make the tea right then. "I'm actually just about to head out for a walk," I lied smoothly, "but I'll definitely try it later. Thank you so much, honey." She looked disappointed for just a fraction of a second before the smile returned. "Of course. Enjoy your walk. Oh, and Mom? You've seemed a little tired lately. Are you sure you're feeling okay?" There it was again. The concerned question that wasn't really concern at all. "Never felt better," I said firmly. "Must be all this lovely summer weather giving me energy." After she left, my husband and I stared at the tea tin like it was a coiled snake. "We need to get this tested," he said. "Absolutely not," I replied. "If we take it to a lab, they'll know we're onto them. We need to be smarter about this." Instead, I did something that might have been crazy. I made a cup of the tea and set it outside near where the neighborhood cat liked to wander. This cat was always coming into our yard, and its owner let it roam free during the day. I'm not proud of using an animal as a test subject, but I needed to know if my instincts were right. 3 hours later, my husband called me to the window. The cat was lying near the bowl, breathing but barely moving. Its whole body seemed limp, unresponsive. I immediately called the cat's owner, claiming I'd found it like this in our yard, and we rushed it to the emergency vet together. The vet ran tests while the owner and I waited, frantic. When the results came back, the vet's face was grim. "Your cat has been exposed to a powerful sedative," she said, "possibly benzodiazepines in a very high dose. Did he get into any medications?" The owner was confused, insisting the cat never went indoors anywhere but their house. I stayed quiet, my mind racing. The cat had only consumed water from that bowl, water I'd made from my daughter-in-law's gift tea. "Will he be okay?" the owner asked tearfully. "We're treating him now. He should recover, but it was a close call. A smaller animal or a larger dose might have been fatal." I felt sick. That tea was meant for me. Daily doses, building up in my system until... What? Until I seemed confused and sedated enough to justify a psychiatric hold? Until my heart gave out and it looked like natural causes? When I got home and told my husband what the vet had said, he immediately called Patricia. She arrived at our house within an hour, bringing someone with her, an investigator she worked with on cases like ours. "We need that tea tin," the investigator said. "We'll get it properly tested at a private lab. Document everything. And we need to do those toxicology tests on you immediately." That night, I gave blood and urine samples at a private medical facility Patricia arranged. The doctor who took them was gentle but serious. "If you've been ingesting benzodiazepines regularly, even in small amounts, we should be able to detect it," she explained. "We'll have results in a few days." Those few days were the longest of my life. Every moment I wondered what was happening in my body. How much poison had I already consumed? What damage had been done? When the results came back, Patricia called us into her office. Her expression was grave. "The tests are positive," she said. You have elevated levels of a prescription sedative in your system consistent with regular, low-dose exposure over several weeks. Combined with the T testing, which also came back positive for the same substance, we now have concrete evidence of attempted poisoning. My husband grabbed my hand so tightly it hurt. But she never drank the tea they brought, he said. Confused. Exactly, Patricia said. Which means they've been using another delivery method. Pills crushed into food, powder and drinks you didn't notice. The tea was going to be their escalation. Higher, more concentrated doses to finish what they'd started with smaller amounts. We had our proof. Our son and his wife weren't just planning to kill me. They'd already started weeks ago through means we hadn't even detected. Patricia wanted to go to the police immediately. She had everything ready, the evidence organized, the narrative prepared, witness statements lined up. But I asked for one more day, just 24 hours to mentally prepare for what would come next. Once we reported this, everything would explode. Our family would be destroyed publicly. There would be arrests, trials, media attention. The life we'd known would end completely. One day, Patricia agreed reluctantly, but after that we're moving forward whether you're ready or not, because every day we wait is another day they might actually succeed. She was right. Of course, but I needed that time. I needed to grieve for the son I thought I had, because once we went to the police, that version of him would be gone forever. That evening, my son called. Hey, Mom, I was thinking about coming by tomorrow with lunch. Just the two of us. I feel like we haven't had quality time lately. My stomach turned. Quality time. Right. That sounds lovely, I heard myself say. What time? How about noon? I'll bring something from that place you like. After I hung up, I told my husband. His face went pale. You're not seriously considering... Of course not, I interrupted. But we should tell Patricia. Maybe this is an opportunity. Patricia's response was immediate and firm. Absolutely not. You are not meeting with him alone. But, she paused, thinking, what if we wire you? Record the conversation. See if we can get him to say something incriminating? The next morning, I met with Patricia and a police detective she'd brought in, a woman who specialized in family violence cases. They fitted me with a small recording device, so tiny it was barely visible under my shirt. Try to bring up your health, the detective instructed. Ask if he's worried about you. See if he mentions the tea, the medical appointments, anything about your cognitive state. Don't push too hard or he might get suspicious, but give him opportunities to reveal his intentions. My husband wanted to be there, hidden somewhere in the house, but Patricia vetoed it. If your son senses anything off, he'll shut down. It has to seem completely normal. So when my son arrived at noon carrying bags of food from our favorite place, I was alone. Well, not alone. The detective and Patricia were parked 2 houses down, listening to everything through the wire, but it felt terrifyingly alone. Hey, Mom, my son said, hugging me. I hugged him back, and for just a second I let myself remember when he was small, when he was innocent, when he loved me without dollar signs in his eyes. We set up the food in the dining room. He'd brought all my favorites, or what used to be my favorites, before I knew that kindness from him came with poison. You look tired, he said as we ate. Are you sleeping okay? Some nights are better than others, I replied carefully. Getting older, I suppose. That's actually something I wanted to talk to you about. He set down his fork, his expression serious. Dad and I have been talking, and we're concerned about some things we've noticed. I forced myself to look interested rather than terrified. What kind of things? Memory issues, mostly. You've been repeating yourself lately, forgetting conversations we've had, and you seem confused sometimes, like you're not quite present. He reached across the table and took my hand. We love you. Mom, we just want to make sure you're getting the care you need. The audacity of it. The sheer audacity of sitting there, holding my hand, expressing fake concern while actively poisoning me. I haven't noticed anything like that, I said carefully. Can you give me specific examples? He rattled off several incidents, all of them completely fabricated. Conversations that never happened. Things I'd supposedly forgotten. Moments of confusion that were pure fiction. He was building his narrative right in front of me. Your doctor is concerned too, he added. Dr. Reynolds mentioned he's seeing early signs of cognitive decline. Did he? I kept my voice neutral. That's interesting because I haven't noticed Dr. Reynolds seeming worried at all. Well, he wouldn't want to alarm you, my son said smoothly. But he and I have discussed it. He thinks you should consider some additional support. Maybe someone to help around the house, keep track of medications, that kind of thing. Medications. There it was. What medications? I asked. I don't take anything except vitamins. That might need to change, he said. There are treatments now for cognitive issues, things that can help slow the progression. He squeezed my hand. I know it's scary to think about, but we're going to take care of you. That's what family does. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my plate at his lying face, but I kept smiling. Actually, speaking of health, I said, how's that tea working out? The one your wife brought me? I've been meaning to try it. Something flickered in his eyes. Just for a second. Oh, you haven't tried it yet? She said you really liked herbal tea. It's supposed to be very calming, good for stress and anxiety. I've been meaning to make some, I lied. Maybe I'll have a cup after you leave. You should, he said, and I swear I saw the ghost of a smile. I think you'd find it really relaxing. We finished lunch making small talk. He asked about my husband's golf game, mentioned a vacation he and his wife were planning, talked about work, normal things. But underneath every word, I could hear what he wasn't saying. Die already. Just die so we can have the money. When he finally left, I sat at the dining table shaking so hard I could barely breathe. The detective and Patricia came in through the back door 10 minutes later. We got it, Patricia said quietly. Not a confession, but enough implications combined with everything else. The part about the tea especially, that's going to be powerful when combined with the toxicology reports. What happens now? I asked. Now we go to the police. Today, right now. We file a report, hand over all the evidence, and let them take over. I nodded numbly. It was time. Past time. But as we were gathering everything to leave for the police station, my phone rang. It was my son. Hey, Mom, I forgot to mention something. Your wife and I are actually in the area this evening. We thought we'd stop by around 6 with some wine. We found this great bottle we wanted to share with you guys. Wine. Of course. More opportunities to poison me, now that I'd agreed to start paying attention to my health. That sounds lovely, I said, my voice remarkably steady. We'll see you at 6. After I hung up, I looked at Patricia and the detective. They're coming back tonight. With wine. The detective's jaw tightened. Then we need to move faster than I thought. We need to get you somewhere safe. And we need to pick them up before they have a chance to... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. We all knew what might happen if my son and daughter-in-law showed up at my house with poisoned wine and no police to stop them. This wasn't just evidence gathering anymore. This was survival. We had 5 hours to put together an arrest operation before my son arrived with his gift. 5 hours before, they realized I knew everything. 5 hours before everything exploded. Patricia started making calls. The detective started coordinating with her department. And I sat there watching the clock, wondering if my son had already decided that tonight would be the night he finally killed his mother. The police station was cold. Everything about it felt cold. The fluorescent lights, the metal chairs, the detective's expression as she walked us through what would happen next. We'd rushed there straight from my house, and now we sat in a small conference room while multiple people came in and out, looking at our evidence, asking questions, taking notes. We have enough for warrants, the lead detective on the case told us. His name was Detective Morrison, and he'd been working fraud and elder abuse cases for 15 years. Financial crimes are clear-cut. The attempted murder charge will be strengthened by the toxicology reports and the tea testing. But I'll be honest with you, we need more if we want this to stick completely. What do you mean, more? My husband asked, his voice tight with frustration. We have evidence of fraud, forgery, falsified medical records, and poisoning. What else do you need? Detective Morrison sighed. We need to catch them in the act. Right now, a defense attorney could argue that someone else had access to your house, that the tea could have been tampered with by anyone, that the messages were taken out of context. We need irrefutable proof of their direct involvement in an attempted murder. That's when Patricia suggested something that made my blood run cold. What if we let them come to the house tonight? With the wine they mentioned? We wire the entire place, have officers waiting nearby, and catch them trying to poison Diane on camera? I must have looked horrified because Patricia quickly added, You wouldn't actually drink anything, obviously. But we could capture them bringing poisoned wine, attempting to serve it, maybe even discussing their plans if they think they're alone. Detective Morrison was nodding slowly. That could work. It's risky, but if we do it right, it would give us exactly what we need. Absolutely not, my husband said immediately. I'm not letting my wife be bait for our son. No way. I'll do it, I heard myself say. Everyone turned to look at me. I'll do it, I repeated, more firmly this time. Because if we arrest them based only on what we have now, there's a chance they could get out on bail. A chance they could plea bargain down to lesser charges. A chance they could somehow spin this and only face a few years. But if we catch them actively trying to murder me on camera, there's no defense, no plea bargain. They go away for a long time. I looked at my husband. I need to do this. The next few hours were a blur. Technical crews came to our house while my son and daughter-in-law thought we were out. They installed tiny cameras in the living room, dining room, and kitchen. They placed audio recording devices in light fixtures and smoke detectors. They set up a monitoring station in the house next door. Our neighbors were on vacation, and the police got emergency access. Detective Morrison walked me through the plan multiple times. My husband and I would be home when my son arrived. We'd act completely normal. Except the wine they brought. Let them suggest we all have a glass together. The moment they tried to pour the wine for us or pressure us to drink, officers would be listening and ready to move in. If at any point you feel unsafe, the detective emphasized, if anything seems like it's escalating beyond what we anticipated, you say the word hospital in a sentence. That's the emergency signal. Officers will be through the door in seconds. By 5:30, everything was in place. Plainclothes officers were positioned around the neighborhood. The house next door was full of people watching camera feeds. Patricia was there too, insisting she needed to see this through. And my husband and I were sitting in our living room, trying to look relaxed while my heart hammered against my ribs. We can still call this off, my husband said for the 10th time. No, I replied. We're doing this. At 6:03, my son's car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I watched him and his wife get out, smiling and laughing like they were coming to a normal family dinner. He was carrying a wine bag. She had a small gift bag in her hand. I opened the door before they could knock. Hello. Come in, come in. They hugged us both. My son handed over the wine bag. This is a really special bottle, he said. Been saving it for the right occasion. And I brought some of those cookies you love. Mom, my daughter-in-law added, holding up her gift bag. Fresh from the bakery. Cookies. They'd brought poisoned cookies too. Of course they had. We all settled in the living room. My son immediately started opening the wine, making a show of how rare and expensive it was, how we absolutely had to try it tonight while it was at the perfect temperature. I'll get glasses, my husband said, his voice remarkably steady. Actually, my daughter-in-law said quickly, I brought special wine glasses. They're in the car. Let me grab them. They'll make the wine taste even better. She left, and for a moment, it was just the three of us. My son, my husband, and me. My son was looking around the room, and I swear he was calculating, measuring, planning. So, Mom, have you thought more about what we discussed at lunch? He asked. About getting some help around the house? We've been talking about it, I said carefully. Good, because I actually brought some paperwork with me. Just some authorization forms for medical care, financial management, that kind of thing. Would make everything so much easier if things get worse. He pulled papers from his jacket pocket. I could see what they were. New power of attorney forms, healthcare proxy forms, documents that would give him complete control over every aspect of my life. My daughter-in-law came back with wine glasses, fancy crystal ones I'd never seen before. She set them on the coffee table with a smile. These are beautiful, I said. They're antiques, she replied. Very valuable. We wanted you to have them. I bet they did. I bet they'd be taking them right back after I was dead, along with everything else. My son poured wine into all 4 glasses, making a production of it. He handed one to me, one to my husband, kept one for himself, and gave the last to his wife. To family, he said, raising his glass. To family, we all echoed. I brought the glass close to my lips, watching them watch me. My son's eyes were locked on my face, waiting for me to drink. My daughter-in-law was smiling that same sweet smile she always had. I was about to pretend to sip when my husband suddenly lurched forward, knocking his glass onto the coffee table. Wine spilled everywhere, dark red spreading across the light wood. Oh God, I'm so sorry, he said, sounding genuinely distressed. I don't know what happened, my hand slipped. Both my son and daughter-in-law jumped up, grabbing napkins, trying to clean up the mess. In the chaos, I managed to pour most of my wine into a nearby plant while no one was looking. It's fine, my son said, but he sounded frustrated. We have plenty more wine. Actually, my daughter-in-law said suddenly, her voice strange, maybe we should have some cookies first. Let the wine breathe a bit more. She was staring at the plant where I'd poured my wine. Had she seen me do it? She opened the gift bag and pulled out a container of cookies. Here, Mom, you should try one. They're your favorite. Chocolate chip. She held out a cookie to me, and I saw something in her eyes. Something sharp and suspicious. The game had changed. She knew something was wrong. "You know what?" I said, keeping my voice light. "I'm actually not feeling great. Might be coming down with something. Maybe we should do this another night." "Mom," my son said, and his voice was different now. Harder. "We came all this way. Can't you just have one cookie?" He moved closer, and so did his wife. They were both standing now, looming over where I sat on the couch. The friendly family dinner atmosphere had evaporated completely. "Just one bite," my daughter-in-law said softly. "Come on, for us." My husband stood up, moving between them and me. "She said she's not feeling well. I think you should go." "We're not going anywhere," my son said, and the mask was fully off now. "Not until Mom has her cookie and her wine. After everything we've done for you both, the least you can do is share this with us." His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Hard. And in that moment, I knew that they knew. Somehow they'd figured out that we were onto them. This wasn't a careful patient poisoning anymore. This was panic. This was desperation. This was dangerous. "Hospital," I said loudly. "I think I need to go to the hospital right now." The front door exploded inward. I've seen police raids in movies, but nothing prepares you for the real thing. The front door crashed open with such force that the doorframe splintered. Officers in tactical gear flooded into my living room, shouting commands, weapons drawn. My son's hand was still wrapped around my wrist when the first officer reached us. "Let her go. Let her go now. Hands up." My son released me so fast I nearly fell backward. His face had gone completely white. His wife screamed, a high-pitched, genuine sound of terror. Both of them were forced to the ground, hands being pulled behind their backs, handcuffs clicking into place. "What is this?" my son kept shouting. "What's happening? Mom? Dad? What did you do?" I couldn't speak. I just sat there on the couch, rubbing my wrist where he'd grabbed me, watching my only child being arrested in my living room. My husband pulled me close, and I realized I was shaking violently. Detective Morrison came in right behind the tactical team. He went straight for the wine bottle and glasses, carefully bagging them as evidence. Another officer collected the cookies. Everything was being photographed, documented, preserved. "You have the right to remain silent." Morrison was reading them their rights. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." My daughter-in-law was crying now, mascara running down her face. "This is insane. We brought wine to visit family and you're arresting us? For what?" "For attempted murder," Morrison said flatly. "For fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. Should I continue?" My son's face did something strange then. The fear disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. He looked directly at me, and when he spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. "You went through my wife's phone," he said. "Not a question. A statement. That's illegal, Mother. Anything you found can't be used in court. Our lawyer will have a field day with this. Your wife's phone wasn't the only evidence," I managed to say, finding my voice. "There's so much more. The bank fraud, the fake medical records, the insurance policies we never signed, the toxicology tests showing I've been poisoned for weeks." I stood up, my legs unsteady but my voice getting stronger. And everything that just happened here was recorded. Multiple cameras, multiple angles, you grabbing me, trying to force me to eat poisoned cookies and drink poisoned wine. All of it. I watched that information sink in, watched him realize just how completely they'd been caught. "The wine and cookies will be tested," Detective Morrison added. "And I'm willing to bet we'll find the same substances we found in the tea, the same substances in your mother's bloodstream, the same substances that could have killed her if she'd consumed enough." My daughter-in-law started sobbing harder. "It was his idea," she blurted out. "All of it. He planned everything. The insurance policies, the fake medical records, everything. I just went along with it. I didn't want to, but he said, 'Shut up!'" My son snarled at her. "Don't say another word." But she couldn't stop now. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. "He said we deserved the money more than they did. That they were old anyway, and would die soon regardless. That we were just speeding up the inevitable. I told him it was wrong, but he said if I didn't help him, he'd divorce me and I'd get nothing." I said, "Shut up!" My son was thrashing against the officers holding him, his face twisted with rage. "You stupid!" An officer pulled my daughter-in-law away from him, and she kept talking through her tears, confessing to everything. How they'd forged our signatures on the insurance documents, how my son had bribed Dr. Reynolds to falsify medical records, how they'd been putting drugs in my tea for 3 weeks, how tonight was supposed to be the final dose that would cause a heart attack. Natural looking. Case closed. "We have surveillance outside," Morrison said to my son. "Your wife just gave you up on camera, and even if she hadn't, we have enough physical evidence to put you away for the next 20 years minimum." They were led out in handcuffs. Neighbors had gathered on the street watching the spectacle. I saw Mrs. Chen from next door with her hand over her mouth, Mr. Rodriguez recording on his phone. The whole neighborhood was witnessing my family's destruction in real time. As my son was being put into a police car, he looked back at the house one last time. Our eyes met, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted hatred. Not regret, not shame, just rage that he'd been caught. After they were gone, Patricia came over from the monitoring station. Her eyes were red, and I realized she'd been crying. "I've been doing this work for 12 years, she said quietly, "and I've never seen anything quite that cold-blooded. I'm so sorry you had to go through this." The house suddenly felt too small, too contaminated. Every corner held a memory that was now poisoned. The dining room where we'd had so many family dinners. The living room where my son used to play as a child. The kitchen where I'd taught him to cook. All of it was tainted now. "We can't stay here," I told my husband. "I can't stay in this house." He nodded. "I know. We'll figure something out." Over the next few days, things moved quickly. The wine and cookies tested positive for a lethal dose of the same sedative found in the tea and in my bloodstream. The amount they'd put in the wine alone would have been enough to cause respiratory failure. The cookies were even worse, concentrated enough that 2 or 3 would have killed me within hours. My daughter-in-law made a deal with the prosecutor. Full cooperation and testimony in exchange for reduced charges. She gave them everything. Written statements, recorded conversations, emails, text messages they'd deleted, but she'd backed up. She even admitted they'd been planning this for over a year, ever since they'd calculated how much the inheritance would be. My son, on the other hand, refused to cooperate at all. His lawyer tried to claim diminished capacity, financial stress, all kinds of defenses that went nowhere. The evidence was too overwhelming. The recordings too clear. His wife's testimony too detailed. The preliminary hearing was 3 weeks after the arrest. My husband and I didn't attend. I couldn't face seeing him again so soon, but Patricia went and reported back to us afterward. "He showed no remorse whatsoever," she said, her voice heavy with disgust. "He actually argued that the money was rightfully his anyway, since he was the only heir. Like that justified attempted murder. We put the house on the market immediately. Neither of us could stand being there anymore. Every room whispered reminders of betrayal. We'd already started packing, sorting through 40 years of accumulated life, trying to decide what to keep and what to leave behind. One afternoon, while boxing up the attic, my husband found an old photo album. He brought it down to show me pictures of my son growing up, birthday parties, school plays, family vacations. In every photo, he was smiling, happy, loved. "What happened to him?" my husband asked, his voice breaking. "When did he become someone who could do this?" I looked at those photos for a long time, trying to find the answer, trying to see some sign, some hint of the person he'd become. But there was nothing. Just a normal kid who grew into a monster. "I don't know," I finally said. "I really don't know." The arraignment was set for 6 weeks after the arrest. Both of them were being held without bail. The judge deemed them too dangerous to release. My daughter-in-law was in a minimum security facility, still cooperating with investigators. My son was in county jail, waiting for trial. 1 week before the arraignment, I received a letter. It was from him. The return address was the jail. I stared at that envelope for 2 hours before I could bring myself to open it. My husband asked if I wanted him to read it first, to spare me whatever poison was inside. But I needed to see it myself. The letter was short, just 2 paragraphs written in his familiar handwriting. "Mom, I know you think I'm a monster, but everything I did was rational. You and Dad are in your 60s. You've lived your lives. My wife and I have decades ahead of us, and we needed that money now, not in 20 years when we're old too. You would have died eventually anyway. I was just making sure the money went where it was supposed to go. To family. To me. I don't expect you to understand, but I'm not sorry. I'm only sorry I got caught. See you in court." I read it 3 times, looking for something, anything, that resembled the son I thought I knew, some hint of the boy I'd raised. But there was nothing. This person was a stranger who'd nearly killed me and felt absolutely no guilt about it. I burned the letter in the fireplace that night, watched the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. It felt symbolic somehow, like burning away the last traces of the son who never really existed. The trial started 4 months after the arrest. My daughter-in-law had already accepted her plea deal. 8 years in exchange for testifying against my son. The prosecution was going after him with everything: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, insurance fraud. If convicted on all counts, he was looking at 30 years to life. I'd been dreading this. The idea of sitting in a courtroom listening to every detail of how my son planned to kill me, facing him across a room while strangers judged our family's darkest moment, it was almost unbearable. My therapist, who I'd been seeing twice a week since this started, suggested I write a victim impact statement but not necessarily attend every day of the trial. "You don't owe anyone your presence," she told me. "Not even the legal system. You've already given enough." But I went anyway. To the first day, at least. I needed to see him. Needed to look him in the eye and let him know that he hadn't destroyed me, that I'd survived despite his best efforts. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Cold, institutional, with fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. My son was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He'd lost weight. His hair was longer, unkempt, but his eyes, those were the same, hard and calculating and completely devoid of remorse. When his gaze found me in the gallery, something flickered across his face. Not guilt, not sadness, something closer to annoyance, like I was inconveniencing him by being there. The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. The attorney, a woman in her 40s named Rebecca Chen, laid out the entire case methodically. She described how my son had spent over a year planning our murders, how he'd manipulated Dr. Reynolds into creating false medical records, how he'd forged our signatures on insurance policies worth millions, how he'd slowly poisoned me over weeks while pretending to be a concerned son. "The defendant didn't just want his parents dead," Chen said, her voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "He wanted them to suffer first. He wanted to destroy their credibility, make them seem incompetent so no one would question when they died. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of poor judgment. This was calculated, premeditated, cold-blooded attempted murder for financial gain." The defense attorney, a slick-looking man who probably cost a fortune, tried to paint my son as a desperate person pushed to extremes by financial pressure and mental health issues. He suggested that the plan had been more fantasy than reality, that my son never would have actually gone through with it. "But he did go through with it," Chen countered. "The toxicology reports prove Mrs. Diane was being poisoned. The wine and cookies brought to her home on the night of the arrest contained lethal doses of sedatives. If police hadn't intervened, she would be dead right now. This wasn't fantasy. This was attempted murder in progress." The first witness was the repair shop owner, Tony. He testified about finding the hidden messages on my daughter-in-law's phone, about the agonizing decision to show them to me. He was nervous, stumbling over words, but his account was clear and consistent. My son's attorney tried to discredit him, suggesting he'd violated privacy laws and that the messages could have been fabricated. But Tony stood firm. "I know what I saw," he said quietly. "And I knew I couldn't live with myself if I let Mrs. Diane die without warning her." Next came Dr. Reynolds. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 4 months. He admitted everything: the falsified medical records, the fabricated symptoms, the collaboration with my son to build a case for my supposed dementia. His voice shook as he described how my son had convinced him it was for my own good. He told me his mother was in denial about her cognitive decline, Dr. Reynolds testified. He said she refused to get help, and that documenting her symptoms was the only way to ensure she'd receive proper care when she needed it. I believed him. I trusted him. And I violated every ethical principle I'd sworn to uphold. The prosecution had him read aloud from the fake medical records. Each invented symptom, each fabricated incident of confusion or memory loss. Hearing my own doctor describe problems I'd never had, creating a fictional narrative of my decline, was surreal and infuriating. Did the defendant ever suggest what would happen after his mother's supposed dementia was documented? Chen asked. Dr. Reynolds nodded miserably. He said it would make it easier to transition her into assisted living or memory care. He said it would help with insurance coverage and legal decisions if she became unable to manage her own affairs. Did he mention anything about insurance policies? He asked me once if early dementia would affect life insurance coverage. I told him it shouldn't, as long as the policies were already in place. Dr. Reynolds looked at me then, his eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Yes, he was sorry now. But where had that conscience been when he was fabricating my medical records? The toxicologist who'd tested my blood was next. She explained in clinical detail exactly what had been in my system, a benzodiazepine called temazepam, normally prescribed for sleep disorders but used here in steadily increasing doses over several weeks. The accumulation pattern suggests regular, consistent exposure, she testified, small amounts building up over time. If the exposure had continued at the rate we observed, the victim would likely have experienced respiratory depression, possible cardiac arrest, or organ failure within another 2 to 3 weeks. I'd been 2 to 3 weeks from dying. The reality of that hit me like a physical blow. The trial lasted 2 weeks total. 47 witnesses testified. Hundreds of pieces of evidence were presented. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned with verdicts, my son was found guilty on every single charge: attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, insurance fraud. All of it. At sentencing 3 weeks later, I read my victim impact statement. I talked about the fear of discovering my own child wanted me dead, the betrayal of every kind word being part of a murder plot, the physical effects of being slowly poisoned. But the worst part isn't what he did to my body, I said. It's what he did to my sense of reality. I can't trust my own memories anymore. He took my sense of safety. I check my tea for poison. I installed security cameras in my own home. But despite everything, I'm still here. I survived. And I'm rebuilding my life, piece by piece. Then my son had his chance to speak. His attorney had probably told him to show remorse, to apologize, to beg for mercy. But that's not what happened. Your Honor, he said, I want to make something clear. I'm not sorry for planning to kill my parents. I'm sorry I got caught. Everything I did was logical and justified. They're old. They've lived their lives. I'm in my 30s with decades ahead of me. The money would have been mine eventually anyway. I was just accelerating the timeline. That's not murder. That's practical resource management. The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed her gavel. Any slim chance of leniency evaporated with that speech. The judge sentenced him to 42 years before parole eligibility. He would be 77 years old before he could even apply for release. As they led him away, he looked at me one last time with pure hatred in his eyes. The months after sentencing were brutal. I had nightmares constantly. PTSD, my therapist called it. My husband went quiet, grieving in his own way. We sold our house because neither of us could stand being there anymore. We moved to a small apartment and started rebuilding our lives. It took me 3 years to finally visit my son in prison. When he was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost weight, his hair was completely gray, and he had scars on his knuckles from fights. Why? I asked him. How did you become someone capable of this? He took a long time to answer. I wanted money. Not just enough. A lot. And I looked at you and Dad with all that retirement savings and life insurance, and I convinced myself I deserved it more. That you were going to die eventually anyway. I built this whole narrative where I was the victim, where killing you was somehow justified. When did it stop making sense to you? During the trial, hearing your victim impact statement, and then that first week in here, when I realized I'd traded everything, my freedom, my future, any chance of happiness, for nothing. I didn't get the money. I destroyed my life and yours for absolutely nothing. So you regret getting caught. Not what you did. No. I regret what I did. It took me a while to get there, but I do. What I put you through is unforgivable. I can apologize until I'm blue in the face, but it won't change anything. You'll always be traumatized by what I did. Over the next few years, I visited him quarterly. We built something careful and boundaried. Not a normal mother-son relationship, but an honest connection about what happened and who we'd become. He started taking college courses, working in the prison library, mentoring other inmates, trying to build purpose from destruction. 5 years after the arrest, my husband had a heart attack requiring surgery. It was terrifying. After surviving our son's murder plot, we almost lost each other to something completely unrelated. The recovery took 8 months of cardiac rehabilitation, medication adjustments, and lifestyle changes. 6 months after he was cleared by his cardiologist, my husband surprised me. I want to visit him, he said one morning. I need to see our son and tell him exactly what the past 5 years have done to us. So we went together, a full 1.5 years after the heart attack. My husband told our son exactly what it had been like, the PTSD, the destroyed relationships, how the chronic stress had contributed to his heart attack. Our son listened without interrupting, tears streaming down his face. Now, 8 years later, I can say I'm surviving and healing simultaneously. I do speaking engagements about elder abuse. I work with legislators on protecting seniors from family exploitation. My husband and I have good lives. We travel, volunteer, made new friends, even got a rescue dog named Maple. Do I forgive my son? I don't know. Some days I feel something that might be forgiveness. Other days I remember him grabbing my wrist, trying to force me to drink poisoned wine, and forgiveness feels impossible. What I have forgiven is myself. I spent years asking what I'd done wrong as a parent. My therapist helped me understand I didn't create his choices. He did. Adults are responsible for their own decisions. We visit him every 3 months. He's completed bachelor's and master's degrees in psychology. He mentors younger inmates and volunteers with financial literacy programs. He's trying to use his time constructively, even if he's never released. I'm never going to ask you for forgiveness, he told me during one visit. What I did is unforgivable. But if you're willing to sit across from me occasionally and let me be honest about who I was and who I'm trying to become, that's more than I deserve. That's grace I never earned. I published an article about my experience under a pseudonym. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of letters from people who'd experienced similar betrayals from family members. Our story wasn't unique. It was tragically common. Someone in my support group asked what I'd learned from all this. I learned that survival isn't the same as healing, but both are worth fighting for, I said. I learned you can lose almost everything and still build something meaningful from what remains. And I learned that the opposite of betrayal isn't trust, it's boundaries. Healthy, strong, unapologetic boundaries. My husband and I were sitting on our balcony last night, watching the sunset, Maple dozing at our feet. It was genuinely peaceful in a way that would have seemed impossible 8 years ago. Do you think we'll ever feel completely normal again? He asked. I don't think so, I said honestly. But I think this is our new normal. And it's not so bad, is it? He squeezed my hand. No, it's really not bad at all. 8 years later, I'm more than just the woman whose son tried to kill her. I'm an advocate, a speaker, a survivor, a wife, a friend, a dog owner, a traveler. I'm all the things my son tried to prevent me from being. And I'm still here, still breathing, still living, still choosing, every single day, to move forward. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, if you're discovering that someone you trust is trying to harm you, please know this. You can survive it. It will be the hardest thing you've ever done. You'll question everything you thought you knew. You'll have moments where you're not sure you want to keep going, but you can survive it. And on the other side of survival, there's life. Real, meaningful life. It won't be the life you planned, but it can still be good. 8 years later, I can finally say, I'm glad I'm alive. Despite everything, because of everything, I'm glad I survived to see this moment and all the moments that came before it and all the moments still to come. That's enough. For now, for today, that's enough.